Today, here, it is a horrible, grey, cold, dark winter morning. So in a way, the conditions are perfect for staying inside here in my podcasting room, where it's nice and warm and cozy. And I can just do another episode of this podcast for you to help you learn English. This time, it's another episode of Learn English with a short story here on Easy English. As usual, I'm going to tell you a story and then use it to help you learn English. The way this will work is like this. First, I'll read the story to you, and I'm going to start that in just a moment. You can just listen, try to follow the lines of the story, and try to understand what's happening. Then I'll explain it. I'll kind of summarize it in my own words just to make sure that you've got the general meaning of what happened. After that, I will go through the story line by line, word by word, and I'll break things down. I'll explain lots of vocabulary for you, maybe some bits of grammar, but I'll explain the specific bits of language that were used to tell you the story. There's loads of vocabulary for you to learn in this story. If you want to practice your pronunciation, you could listen to the whole story again. You could go back and listen to me read the story and try to repeat the lines after me. This time, I've got a creepy winter story for you. It's called The Snowman. A snowman, of course, is something that children usually make when it snows. So the snow comes down, and children would go out and make snowballs and have snowball fights. The other thing that children do is they make a snowman, right? They make a kind of a man made of snow. That's a snowman. So this story is called The Snowman. I found this story on a YouTube channel, actually. So let's begin. First of all, try to follow the events of the story and just decide what is going on, what's happening, what's going to happen next, what's going on in this story. Now, I'm not sure if this is a true story or if it's a made-up story, right? I don't know if these things actually happened to the writer or if this is just fiction. I don't know, actually. I think it could be true, but I don't know for sure. And also, I don't think this is a supernatural story. I don't think the events in the story are supernatural, like ghostly or something like that. I don't think so, but, you can decide for yourself as you listen. So here we go. This is The Snowman. Let's get started. I was a struggling ghostwriter, and I thought a break away from the city to spend time at a remote ski resort would be a good way to clear my head and help me get back on my feet. There weren't any other cabins around, so I was guaranteed a few weeks to reflect and enjoy the isolation. At least that was the case until the final week of my stay, which made this Christmas truly unforgettable. It first started at night when I suddenly woke up. Initially, I didn't know if it was from something I'd heard or from a bad dream, but either way, I felt compelled to look out of the window. That's when I noticed the snowman in the distance. Back when I was a kid, I would have been delighted at the mere sight of a snowman, but that sense of childhood nostalgia was soon silenced by the realization that I wasn't alone out there in the woods. The cabin where I was staying was the only one on this side of the alley, so it seemed like a long way to walk just to build a snowman. Despite the uncanny feeling, I was still far too tired to give it much thought and managed to sleep through the rest of the night. The following morning, to no surprise, the snowman was still there. I couldn't quite put my finger on it right then, but I got this strange notion that something was different about it. I decided to carry on with my day and Didn't think much of it until later that night when it happened again. I woke up suddenly for no apparent reason. I don't remember having a bad dreaming, but I guess it's common not to remember our dreams, even the really bad ones. It felt like déjà vu, and I found myself once again gazing through the bedroom window. I could still see the snowman even clearer now. I couldn't quite figure out why, but it gave me an odd sensation. I also started to wonder why the snowman was facing towards the cabin and why anyone would build a snowman all the way out here. There weren't any other cabins around for miles. I didn't sleep much after that, so the next morning I decided to head outside the cabin for a closer look. I looked around, but just as I expected, there was no trace of anyone, although it was hard to be sure considering how poor the visibility was due to the weather. I chose to knock the snowman down just for good measure. It was already beginning to feel like some kind of bad omen. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was just some kids fooling around, but at least I wouldn't have to think about it anymore. Or so I thought. The following night, things got even worse. I woke up again, but this time I knew for sure it wasn't from a dream. It was a loud thud, like the sound of something hitting the window. I glanced through the window and was shocked to see the same snowman, identical to the day before. I remember turning in quite late that night, and there was no sign of a snowman when I turned out the lights, so I was pretty sure it wasn't a kid's prank. I mean, who would let their kids out this late to build a snowman? And what was that noise on the window? The last thing I wanted to do was go outside in the blistering cold, but I knew that if I waited until morning, any footprints would most likely be covered by another thick layer of snow. I ultimately got dressed, stepped outside, and walked up to the snowman. That's when I discovered a single set of very large footprints leading from and to the forest. I couldn't shake this feeling of being watched, and that somehow I'd made things worse by destroying the last snowman. So I decided to leave it alone and quickly headed back to the cabin. The bitter cold stayed with me that night as I curled up in bed and tried my best to get warm, but the prospect of getting any sleep soon came to an abrupt end with a noise on the glass. I recognized it instantly, the sound of a snowball hitting the window. I knew deep down that it could only mean one thing. Needless to say, I didn't sleep a wink that night, and I left the cabin the very next day. I never knew his name or ever saw his face, but I came to know him as the Snowman. Boo! Ha! Got you! Okay, so that was the Snowman. Let me just try and summarize what happened. What did you expect? What were you expecting to happen? I don't know what you were expecting to happen. Were you expecting something? Were you expecting some more action than that? It's more a kind of creepy story that describes a sort of atmosphere. You can see why I think it could be true, but I'm not sure. You can decide for yourself. And also, as I said before, I don't think it's a supernatural story, but I'm not sure. I actually read that story to my daughter. She's nearly 7. I mean, it's a slightly scary story, but she's okay. She enjoys creepy stories like that, and there wasn't anything really violent in it or anything. And her first reaction was that the snowman itself was alive and that the snowman kept coming to stand outside the cabin, and that it was the snowman who was throwing snowballs at the guy's window at night. I don't think that's what's going on, but it's possible, I suppose. I mean, it's some sort of haunted snowman or something, I don't know. I think probably instead someone is building this snowman, and that's the disturbing thing. Who is doing this, and where are they? Who are they? And what's going on? So basically, just to summarize the story, did you get these details? Did you understand the main details of the story? The narrator, the person who tells the story, is a struggling writer, a writer who's probably finding it difficult to do their writing. Maybe he's got writer's block. Writer's block is a condition, sort of a thing that affects writers, where they just can't come up with ideas. They sit in front of the computer, ready to write more stuff, and just ideas don't come. Writer's block means they sit there staring at a blank screen with no ideas coming. They can't write. It must be very difficult to write novels, to write stories, to write things. You need a lot of inspiration and motivation and stuff, and sometimes those ideas and things just don't come. When you're in that state, it's called writer's block. So maybe the guy's got writer's block, and he decides that he has to try and find a way of clearing his head. He goes to stay at a remote ski resort in the mountains, and he chooses to stay in a cabin which is on the far side of a valley where there are no other cabins, right out on the edge of the resort with no other people around. It's totally isolated, so he can just enjoy being cut off from the rest of the world, get out of the city, and focus on his writing. He's hoping that this will be a way to fix his writer's block. So out he goes, and he spends a couple of weeks there at Christmas time, which sounds like quite a lonely thing to do. He doesn't spend time with his family. No, instead, he's on his own in this cabin in a remote part of the forest where I expect it snows every night because it's a ski resort. The first week is okay, but by the second week things start to go a bit strange. One night he wakes up in the middle of the night. He's not quite sure why. For some reason he feels drawn to the window. He has a look out of the window, and there, in the distance, he can see a snowman, which is a little bit strange. It makes him realize that he's not alone in the forest, that there are other people not far away, because there's a snowman that's been built. Okay, a bit weird. Something was strange about it. Something felt a bit off. The main thing was that he realized he wasn't alone. There must have been other people around without him realizing it. Then in the morning, he looked out the window, and the snowman was still there, but a little bit clearer. I wonder if the snowman appears to be getting closer. I get the impression that there's a suggestion that the snowman is slowly getting closer to the cabin. It starts off in the distance. You can kind of only just see it, and then it gets clearer and clearer. He remarks that each time he sees the snowman, something is a bit different, and he can see it more clearly. So it seems that the snowman is slowly getting closer to the cabin every time he sees it. The next night, after he's seen it in the daytime, he kind of just ignores it. He just thinks, oh, it must be some kids or something who've made it. But then he goes to bed again, and the next night, it happens again. He wakes up. He's not quite sure why he's woken up. He thinks maybe he had a bad dream or something. He wakes up, and again he feels like he needs to look out the window. He looks out of the window. The snowman is still there, but it seems to be clearer again. The suggestion is that maybe the snowman is closer to the cabin this time. I'm not sure quite when. Maybe he wakes up because he's being woken up by the sound of something hitting the window. He doesn't realize it at first, But that night, he's so disturbed by the snowman that he doesn't really want to go outside to have a look around. So he waits until the next day. He goes out in order to have a look around, see what's going on, and see if he can find any signs of maybe who's done it. He looks around, but the weather is so bad. It's probably snowing quite heavily, and he can't really see much. He can't see any evidence of other people. If there were footprints in the snow, they would have been covered by another layer of snow already. So he doesn't see any evidence of who's done this, but he's so disturbed by it that he knocks down the snowman. He just knocks it down and then goes back to the cabin. Then that night, it happens again. He's woken up by a sound. He doesn't quite know what the sound is. It's a kind of like a thud. And he wakes up suddenly and again looks out of the window. The snowman is back. It's back again after he knocked it down. It's returned. It's the same snowman. It's back again, and it appears to be even closer to the cabin this time. This really freaks him out this time, and he really doesn't want to go outside the cabin in the middle of the night in the snow. But I think he feels so disturbed by it that he chooses to go out and have a look. All he can see is a set of footprints that lead to the forest and back again. So, it looks like someone has come out of the forest to the place where the snowman is, presumably to build the snowman. I mean, the writer doesn't mention there being a lot of disturbance in the snow, where the snow has been gathered together to make the snowman. I assume that would be the case, but that's not mentioned. Anyway, there's a set of footprints that go from the forest to the snowman and back again, so it seems that someone has just come out of the forest and built this thing. Or maybe it's a haunted snowman that's walked out of the forest and decided to stand there and throw snowballs at the cabin. Just, because why not? If you're a haunted snowman, I suppose that's the sort of thing you would do. Why would you just stay in the forest and eat nuts and stuff? I don't know, you'd probably think, well, since I'm a haunted snowman, I should probably go and scare some people in cabins. I don't think that's the case, though. I think the idea is that someone has come out and built this snowman. I don't remember, does he knock it down then? I don't remember. But he is woken up again by the sound of a snowball hitting the window. He's certain about it, and he can't sleep the rest of the night. And it scares him so much that he just leaves. He leaves the cabin and goes back to the city, and it clearly scared him. He thinks about it a lot because, in the end, he names this guy the Snowman, presumably the person, whoever this was, who was creeping around outside his cabin at night, building this weird snowman and throwing snowballs. That person he calls the Snowman. So for me, this is the sort of story which is supposed to be quite disturbing, because a lot of things are unanswered, rather than a story in which there's a lot of specific, direct action. Instead, it's just one of those things that's supposed to make you wonder. I think it is quite creepy, because if you can imagine being in that situation, I'm sure you would end up being quite disturbed. I like the way the story is put together. It's efficiently told. We can easily imagine how the storyteller felt in this situation, and it leaves us to imagine the explicit details and the answers to the mystery. Did you notice that the snowman seemed to get closer each time? I think the suggestion is that the narrator is not alone in this secluded part of the forest. An unknown person kept coming out of the forest in the night to build this snowman, each time getting slightly closer to the cabin. That this person also threw snowballs at the window of the cabin. I'm assuming that this is the case. unless the snowman itself is actually somehow alive and doing these things independently. But that would give a supernatural edge to the story. Maybe you interpreted it that way, like my daughter did. So what did you think? What was your reading of the story? I think these are the options in my mind. Option one is that there was a human person outside the cabin building the snowman each time and throwing snowballs at the window. Or the snowman was actually alive and walked out of the forest in order to stand and stare at the cabin and occasionally throw snowballs at the window. Now, assuming that this has been done by a person during the night, who is this person and why are they doing it? And I think there are a few possibilities here too. So maybe it's just a prank. A prank is like a trick done as a joke, sort of like a practical joke that people play on other people. So maybe this is just a prank, a kind of trick or joke, but it's not really very funny. It's more frightening, really. Or is it some kind of threat? Maybe it's a form of intimidation or a form of mental manipulation, kind of confusion. Maybe this person is making the writer feel scared for some reason. They're playing some sort of cruel game to manipulate him, maybe to harm him, rob him, or make him feel unwelcome for some reason. Maybe this person outside the cabin is somehow dangerous. What do you think? Anyway, let's go through the storyline by line now, and I'll teach you some vocabulary, looking at specific meanings, useful phrases, and how you can use them to describe other things as well. Okay, so let's do that. So here we go. The Snowman vocab review. I was a struggling ghostwriter, and I thought a break away from the city to spend time at a remote ski resort would be a good way to clear my head and help me get back on my feet. So we've got a struggling ghostwriter, well, start with that. So you know what a writer is, someone who writes books or something. A ghostwriter is a person who writes books for someone else, and then that someone else claims the credit for the book. Let's say you've got a celebrity who wants to write an autobiography. An autobiography is the story of their life written by that person. But this celebrity is not a particularly good writer. They might use a ghostwriter to actually write the book for them, but then on the cover of the book, it's the celebrity's name that's written, and the ghostwriter's name is not written anywhere. Right, so a ghostwriter is someone who anonymously writes for someone else. Okay? And there are a lot of people who use ghostwriters. It's actually surprising the number of famous writers who use ghostwriters, like someone like Dan Brown, who wrote The Da Vinci Code. Apparently, he used a lot of ghostwriters in the writing of that book. He didn't do it all on his own. He got some other people to do it. And apparently, plenty of other famous writers of novels use ghostwriters to do the actual writing. It might be a collaboration. It might be that the person whose name is on the book gives the ideas, the basic framework, the plot line, details of the characters, and they just give those details to the ghostwriter, and the ghostwriter does the actual practical work of writing out the text. So ghostwriters are very commonly used by someone who writes things for someone else, but their name isn't credited. Yeah, so a struggling ghostwriter. Struggling means that they were finding it hard. They were having difficulty writing. As I said, maybe they had writer's block, and I thought a break away from the city to spend time at a remote ski resort would be a good way to clear my head. A remote ski resort. So remote meaning far away from other things, right? Just far away from the city, far away from other people. That's remote. Okay. A remote ski resort would be a good way to clear my head. So sometimes If you're struggling, if you can't think of ideas, you can't focus, you can't concentrate, it's because there's too much stuff going on in your head. Maybe you're distracted by all the things around you. If you're in a busy city, there's noise, there's distractions. So you need to clear your head, and, we clear our heads in various ways. One of the most common ways is to get away from it all, to go out into the countryside, to get away from everyone, to get away from everything. It could be a good way to clear your head, right? To get rid of all those distractions, all that mental noise. So go to a remote ski resort to clear his head and help me get back on my feet. To get back on your feet, this is quite a nice idiom. It means if you're struggling and you can't do things as you normally do them, you need to be able to get back on your feet. It's a bit like if you've been ill. I mean, literally, if you're sick, you have to stay in bed and you can't do anything because you're lying down, but then you recover and then you're able to get back on your feet, which means that you're able to go out and do things again. That's literally getting back on your feet, but we can use it metaphorically as well to mean getting back to a position where you're able to do things again. For example, if you're struggling with writer's block and you can't work and you're having a really difficult time, you need to maybe go away, clear your head, and get back on your feet. There weren't any other cabins around, so I was guaranteed a few weeks to reflect and enjoy the isolation. So to reflect is something that you do in your mind, right? If you reflect, it means think about things more carefully, think about things several times, to ponder things, to process things, to think about things. Reflect is something that happens with a mirror. So if you look in a mirror, your image reflects off the mirror. Also, if you look in the surface of some still water, like a pond, your image is reflected off the surface of the water, right? So if you reflect in your mind, it's kind of like you allow your thoughts to kind of bounce back and you look and look again or think again about things, right? To reflect and enjoy the isolation. So we had the word remote, a remote cabin. We've also got the word isolation here. Remote is an adjective. Remoteness is the noun. Isolation is a noun, and isolated is the adjective. So just the difference between these two things. Remote means far away. Remoteness, right? This is referring to something that is physically distant, physically far away from things, or figuratively far away from things. We talk about a remote village in the mountains. An idea seems to be remote from reality. For example, the suggestion that this is an alien snowman or like a haunted snowman, that idea is quite remote from reality. Here's reality. There are no such things as haunted alien snowmen as far as I'm aware. And the idea of a haunted snowman is quite far. It's quite remote from reality, right? A remote cabin is one which is far away from civilization. Then an isolated cabin. So isolated just means disconnected or alone. Alone and not connected to other things. So they're very similar, but remote refers to physical distance, really, in a literal sense, and sort of distance in a figurative sense. Isolated means not being connected or being alone. So isolated has that sense of loneliness or being alone and not connected to other people, separate, apart from others, either intentionally or unintentionally. And so isolated is often a bit more negative. It's associated with loneliness, whereas remote could be more positive because it sounds quite nice to be in a remote cabin in a remote part of the forest. It could be quite peaceful. Okay, so anyway, I was guaranteed a few weeks to reflect and enjoy the isolation. So here, the writer is actually going to enjoy being isolated in this case. At least that was the case until the final week of my stay, meaning that, it was nice to be isolated and remote for a week until the final week, which made this Christmas truly unforgettable. But unforgettable in a negative way, something that he remembered forever. It first started at night when I suddenly woke up. Initially, I didn't know if it was from something I'd heard or from a bad dream. So it seems that it was another snowball hitting the window. But at this point, he didn't know and wasn't aware if it was something he'd heard or if it was from a bad dream. It was probably the sound of a snowball hitting the window. To be fair, initially just means at first, right? It's just an adverb, another way of saying at first. So you've got initially or at first or in the beginning, which is another way of doing it. Initially, I didn't know if it was from something I'd heard or from a bad dream. But either way, I felt compelled to look out of the window. I felt compelled to tell this story. Okay, I felt compelled to write you an email. Okay, if you feel compelled to do something, it means you feel a sudden kind of urgent motivation or a certain need suddenly to do something. For example, Mark, I was listening to your episode and I felt compelled to get in touch with you. It's the sort of thing that my listeners might write to me. Mark, I've been listening to your podcast for a long time, and today I felt compelled to write to you. I felt compelled to get in touch, to tell you how truly thankful I am for everything you've done for learners of English around the world, and how I would like to give you a knighthood this year. Yours sincerely, the King. I'm just fantasizing there about King Charles suddenly feeling compelled to write to me in order to offer me a knighthood. Sir Mark Thompson. It's never going to happen. That's when I noticed the snowman in the distance. So he felt compelled to look out of the window. Like, I don't know why, but I really feel like I'd like to look out the window at this moment, which can be a scary thing when you're in a cabin in the middle of the forest at night, and you're kind of not sure if you want to do this, but you feel like you have to do it. And, hello, there's a snowman in the distance. I don't remember seeing that before. Funny, that's funny, isn't it? Back when I was a kid, I would have been delighted at the mere sight of a snowman. So, the mere sight of a snowman, mere here. So the word mere is a bit like using the word just or only. It emphasizes that something is small or unimportant in itself, but it still has a big effect, right? I would have been delighted at the mere sight of a snowman means I would have been delighted just to see a snowman. Like, only seeing one would have made me excited, never mind actually going up and playing with it or making it or something. So, just seeing a snowman would have, the mere sight of a snowman would have made me delighted, or simply seeing a snowman would have made me delighted. All ways of saying more or less the same thing. The mere smell of baking bread makes me hungry. So just smelling it makes me hungry. Another example. I get nervous at the mere mention of the words observed lesson. So, as an English teacher, I get nervous at the mere mention of the words observed lesson. So if someone just says observed lesson, oh God, I start to get nervous because it makes me think of the days when I used to be observed. When I was training to be a teacher, you'd get some sort of examiner or observer, maybe from Cambridge English. They'd come and observe you, watch everything you do, make notes about you, and then, judge everything you do as a teacher. So just the mere mention of the words observed lesson makes me nervous. Another example, I've always been scared of spiders. It's not actually true. I love spiders. Anyway, I've always been scared of spiders. The mere sight of one in the bath would make me run screaming from the building, only to return with a flamethrower. So, just like, oh God, just seeing one, it doesn't even have to jump on my face or anything. Just seeing it would make me run from the building and then come back just to torch the entire building, the entire house. Okay, so I would have been delighted as a kid at the mere sight of a snowman. So just seeing one would have made me delighted. But that sense of childhood nostalgia was soon silenced by the realization that I wasn't alone out there in the woods. So he kind of had that quick moment of, oh, a snowman. And he remembered and felt slightly nostalgic about his childhood. So when you feel nostalgic, it's when you have a sense of nostalgia. It's like when you look back at the past and feel that nice warm feeling. That's nostalgia. Oh yeah, I remember when I was a kid, I used to get really excited if I saw a snowman. But this sense of nostalgia was soon silenced. Made me delighted, or just the sight of a snowman would have made me delighted. So, stop. It was stopped by the realization, ding, oh hello. When he realized that he wasn't alone out there in the woods. So, he opened the window or opened the curtains or whatever, had a look out. Oh, a snowman, huh? Oh, so I suppose I'm not alone out here in the woods then. There must be other people around or someone. Okay. The cabin where I was staying was the only one on this side of the valley, so it seemed like a long way to walk just to build a snowman. The cabin where I was staying was the only one on this side of the valley. This side of the valley. Now you know what a valley is, right? You've got two mountains, and between the mountains you've got a valley, and probably at the bottom of the valley there's a river or something. So this is the valley. It's the space between two mountains or a part of where the land goes down, maybe to a river or road at the bottom. The cabin where I was staying was the only one on this side of the valley. So valleys have sides, right? You've got this side and that side of the valley. Mountains also have sides. The sides of mountains are usually the broader, lower parts of the mountains. Mountains also have faces as well, and these are the upper parts, the steep upper parts that you might climb with ropes and stuff to reach the summit of the mountain. A bit of mountain vocab for you there. The summit or peak of the mountain, that's the top that you try to get to if you're a mountain climber. Then you've got the mountain faces. These are probably very steep parts that you need special equipment to climb up. And then you've got the sides of the mountain, which are the larger, lower areas. And then the valley as well, the two sides of a valley. Yeah, okay. So despite the uncanny feeling, I was still far too tired to give it much thought and managed to sleep through the rest of the night. So, despite the uncanny feeling, what kind of feeling is this? What kind of feeling is an uncanny feeling? Well, uncanny is basically something that feels strange or mysterious or unsettling. Something that makes you feel kind of disturbed, often because it's strangely familiar or difficult to explain. So something uncanny is strange because it's sort of familiar or difficult to explain. It could be either of those things. Okay, for example, imagine looking at a robot, like a really advanced robot that's running with advanced AI. And the robot is designed to look like a human. It looks a lot like a human, but it's not human. You would say that's quite uncanny, right? It's strange, slightly disturbing, because it looks so close to being human, but it's not. So that's an uncanny feeling. You could say the robot's uncanny resemblance to a human made everyone uncomfortable, which is kind of the disturbing thing about these advanced robots. There's something strangely familiar about them, even those ones that walk on 4 legs. You know, the ones that walk on 4 legs and open doors and climb over piles of rocks and fire machine guns and stuff. You know those ones? There's something uncanny about the legs. The way the legs move, they look a bit like animal legs or human legs sometimes, but it's a robot. It's a bit disturbing. They have an uncanny resemblance to animals sometimes. Another example, the magician's trick, a trick by a magician. The magician's trick was so uncanny no one could figure out how it was done. So, just strange because it was difficult to explain. So in this case, in the story, it's a strange feeling because it's hard to explain the presence of the snowman. Something just feels a little bit off about it. Something's not quite right here. So, despite the uncanny feeling, I was still far too tired to give it much thought and managed to sleep through the rest of the night. To give it much thought, to give something thought, it's interesting because, of course, we say to think about something, as you know, but also you can give something thought. I was too tired to give it much thought, to give it a lot of thought. So that's just interesting to notice that we can say to give something thought rather than just say to think about it, right? And also to give it much thought. I didn't want to give it much thought. I was too tired to give it much thought, meaning I didn't want to think about it much, okay? And those things are slightly different. I don't think about it much, and I don't give it much thought. Those things are slightly different. I don't think about it much sounds a bit like you're saying, I don't think about it very often. I don't think about her very much could mean I don't think about her very regularly. And I don't give her much thought means that I don't think about her very deeply or for a very long time. I don't think about her very deeply. They're similar, but you can see there's a slight nuance there between I don't think about her much, meaning very often, and I don't give her much thought, meaning I just don't think about her deeply or for a very long time. Okay, so in this case I was too tired to give it much thought, so he didn't think about it very deeply and managed to sleep through the rest of the night, all the way through without waking up. The following morning, to no surprise, the snowman was still there. All right, to no surprise. It's just another phrase that you could use instead of saying unsurprisingly. So you could say unsurprisingly. Unsurprisingly, the snowman was still there, or it's the middle of winter, so unsurprisingly, it's cold and dark. Okay, the following morning, to no surprise, the snowman was still there. You could finish that sentence, unsurprisingly it was quite long, or unsurprisingly, it was absolutely brilliant, a work of genius. Next, I couldn't quite put my finger on it right then, but I got this strange notion that something was different about it. I couldn't put my finger on it. So, put your finger on it means define, identify, recognize, or explain something. I just couldn't quite put my finger on it means I couldn't really explain it. I couldn't define it. I couldn't identify or explain exactly what it was. In this case, the feeling I was having. So, You know that something is strange or wrong, but you just can't quite explain it. You can't quite put your finger on it. Another example, there was a strange atmosphere in the room. It was like something was not quite right, but I just couldn't put my finger on it. Another example, his face seemed strangely familiar, like I'd seen him before, but I just couldn't put my finger on it. No matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't put my finger on it. And then he shouted, "Stop poking me in the face with your finger!" Oh, sorry, I met a man, and his face seemed very familiar, but I just couldn't put my finger on it. No matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't put my finger on it until he shouted at me, "Stop poking me in the face with your finger, you idiot!" Oh, sorry. You seem very familiar. I just can't put my finger on it. I know. Get your finger away from my face. Obviously, we're not literally putting our finger on something. It's just an idiom. I just can't put my finger on it. Means there's something strange about that, but I just can't quite put my finger on it. It's different from that expression when you can't think of the word. If you can't think of the word like, no, what's that word? It's just, what's his name? You know, the actor. It's, he's in that, he's in those films. The actor, the American one. Yeah. And, that's what we would say. It's on the tip of my tongue. So that's different. That's when you can't quite remember the word for something. You'd say, oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. But this is, I can't quite put my finger on it. It means I can't explain it. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I got this notion. I got this strange notion that something was different. A notion is a sense of something or an idea of something, right? I just got this strange sense. I got this strange idea that something was different about the snowman. I think the snowman was closer. I think that's the subtext. I decided to carry on with my day and didn't think much of it until later that night when it happened again. So we've got, I didn't think much of it, meaning I didn't think it was very important. I didn't think much of it. I don't think much of it means I didn't think it was very good. I didn't think it was very interesting. So I didn't think much of it means I didn't like it. I didn't think it was very important. Let me just highlight that here. I didn't think much of it, meaning I didn't think it was very interesting or important. And I didn't think about it much. Remember that one? I didn't think about it much, meaning I didn't think about it very often or for very long. I didn't give it much thought means I didn't think about it very deeply. Okay, so just 3 different ways that we use the word think. I didn't think much of it, didn't like it. I didn't think about it much, didn't think about it very often. And I didn't give it much thought, didn't think about it deeply. In this case, I didn't think much of it, meaning I didn't think it was very important, until later that night when it happened again. And then he realized that actually there was something going on, something more serious. I woke up suddenly for no apparent reason, for no reason. It's quite a nice expression when you just can't really explain why something happened. There's no reason. No apparent reason, no obvious reason, no clear reason for something. For example, he just hit that man in the face for no apparent reason. Why did you do that? He just did it for no apparent reason? Okay, so I woke up suddenly for no apparent reason, just woke up. No particular reason why. Why? Must have been another snowball on the window. I don't remember having a bad dream, but I guess it's common not to remember our dreams, even the really bad ones. It felt like déjà vu, and I found myself once again gazing through the bedroom window. So déjà vu. This is French, but we use it in English. It's a common expression in English. Déjà vu describes a very specific feeling, a very strange feeling. It's an uncanny feeling that you've seen it all before. This seems so familiar, like I feel like I've lived these moments before, which is really weird, isn't it? In the movie The Matrix, that's described as being a glitch in the Matrix. But we do get déjà vu. I mean, do you ever get that? It's a really weird feeling. Like you maybe suddenly feel a bit weird, like a bit tired, or like you're in a little bit of a dream or something. And you just think, oh, wait a minute, I swear I have lived this moment before. Every single little moment, every detail feels familiar. It must be some sort of little mental thing, like a neurological thing that causes us to feel that way. But it's certainly strange. Anyway, we call that specific thing déjà vu. But also you can say, it felt like déjà vu. If something feels like déjà vu, it just means you feel like you're repeating something that's happened before. It feels like déjà vu. So, any situation where something happens again, like, I don't know what it would be like. You're at work and the fire alarm goes off. It's like, this happened last week. This is like déjà vu. It's just something that happens again, repeatedly. And it's sort of strange, say it feels like déjà vu. So it felt like déjà vu, like, that's weird. This is exactly the same thing that happened before. And I found myself once again gazing through the bedroom window. To find yourself doing something, it's as always, find yourself. I found myself gazing through the window. I found myself walking down the street. I found myself watching the new Star Wars TV series. If you find yourself doing something, we use this expression to explain or describe how you kind of do something impulsively. You just end up doing it. You don't even really realize or think about it. You just sort of impulsively, instinctively do it, and then you realize that you're doing it. Oh, I suppose I'm watching this. I found myself watching the new Star Wars TV series. It was late at night. I found myself watching this old movie. I just ended up watching it. I chose to watch it without even really realizing it. So it felt like déjà vu, and I found myself once again gazing through the bedroom window. I could still see the snowman even clearer now. I couldn't quite figure out why, but it gave me an odd sensation. I also started to wonder why the snowman was facing towards the cabin, and why anyone would build a snowman all the way out here. So, I started to wonder why the snowman was facing towards the cabin. So we do say wonder why when you're trying to understand someone's actions or a situation. I was trying to wonder why. I was wondering why she wasn't speaking to me. I wondered why she was ignoring me. Why is she ignoring me? Why is she not talking to me? What have I done wrong? Or in this case, I started to wonder why the snowman was facing toward the cabin. So it's to wonder why, plus it's actually present continuous, isn't it? Plus the continuous form, past continuous. I started to wonder why the snowman was facing towards the cabin. I wondered why she was ignoring me, So the snowman was facing towards the cabin basically means facing in a direction, right? Pointing in that direction. A person can face in a certain direction. Like, as a teacher, I might say, could you turn your chairs around so that you can face the whiteboard? That way you're not bending your neck. Try and turn around so you're facing the whiteboard. It'll make it easier for you. Face in a direction face towards the cabin, face away from the cabin, face towards the whiteboard, face towards the window, meaning be positioned in that direction. There weren't any other cabins around for miles. To be around means to be in the area, of course. So there weren't any other cabins in the area. There weren't any other cabins around for miles. I didn't sleep much after that, so the next morning I decided to head outside the cabin for a closer look. So to head outside, head here, obviously. Normally this is a noun, like your head is part of your body, right? It should be part of your body. It should be connected to your body at all times. Can you just, if you just check, yeah, good, mine is still connected, just being sure. You can never be too sure. Certainly, when you're learning English, it's very important to make sure that your head is connected to your body. Anyway, to head is a verb, isn't it? To head outside means to go, to go in that direction. To head outside the cabin for a closer look at the snowman. So, to head inside, to head outside, to head home, to head to the park, to head to school, to head to work, head to the shops, meaning go to these places. I looked around, but just as I expected, there was no trace of anyone. I looked around. Now, obviously, we use the word look with no what that means, but we often use it with different prepositions, usually different directions. You look up at the sky, look down at the ground, look for something. Where is it? Where is it? Where's my key? Is it here? Is it here? I'm looking for my key. Has anyone seen my key? Look for something. To look into something would be to look inside something or look inside a situation, like investigate. The police are looking into it. There's that old joke. Did you hear about what did you hear about the crime at the nudist colony? No, it was, did you hear about the hole in the wall at the nudist colony? Someone put a hole in the wall at the nudist colony, but it's okay. The police are looking into it. So, a nudist colony, this is a place where people go to be naked, to be nude, right? I don't know if this is a thing in your country, but in some places, some people like to spend their time without their clothes on. It must be liberating and nice. I mean, I would find it pretty embarrassing, but that's probably the wrong way to think about it. But nudist colonies, these are private places where people can go and just spend their time without their clothes on. I don't think they do anything. I don't think they're doing any sexual things, but they're just going around living their lives, maybe drinking drinks, reading books, and maybe playing a bit of tennis or something, and they're just not wearing any clothes. This is a nudist colony, a specific private place behind closed doors, maybe like a leisure club or a place in the countryside. So did you hear about the hole in the wall of the nudist colony? A hole in the wall would be something that you'd be able to look through the hole in the wall to have a look inside the nudist colony, to look at all the naked people. Did you hear about the hole in the wall of the nudist colony? Yeah, if it's okay, the police are looking into it. So the police are investigating it. They're trying to work out who did it. But also they are looking into it, meaning, yes, of course, they are looking into the hole at all the naked people. So anyway, to look into something can mean to investigate something. To look back, you can literally look back, meaning look behind you, but you can look back in time, in terms of the past, to think back. I was thinking back about my ex-girlfriend. It's important not to look back. Don't look back. Just keep focused on the future or the present. Look forward, meaning Obviously look in that direction, but also look forward in terms of the future. You can look forward to something or look forward to doing something, meaning anticipate it. Think about something that's coming in the future, normally in a positive way. I'm really looking forward to seeing everybody at Christmas. I'm really looking forward to my holiday. So think about things in the future in a positive way. Look around. Have we had that already? Look around is kind of like look left, look right, look all around. I'm trying to find my friend. Have you seen my friend? He should be waiting here somewhere. I'm just looking around. Your head turns left and right. Look out, look out. Watch out for that. Look out, meaning kind of be aware. So lots of different expressions with look. Look up, look down, look for, look into, look back, look forward, look around, look out. And then obviously even more complex idiomatic ones. To look down on someone, meaning to consider them to be lower than you. You know, I look down on people who... What? I look down on football fans. Such an unsophisticated sport. I prefer, sophisticated literature. So to look down on someone is to consider them to be lower than you. To look up to someone would be to respect someone. Like, for example, I like to play music. I play drums, right? I've been playing drums for years. And I love playing drums, but I have, like, my drum heroes who I really look up to. Recently, I've been watching videos of Steve Jordan. He's a fantastic drummer. These days, he drums with the Rolling Stones. He's their drummer, and he's an excellent drummer. He does these really good grooves. He's got a fantastic sense of time and feel. I really look up to him as a drummer. I just really respect him.